interact with the data system? Just show of hands. How many of you guys are using the data system right now of some sort? Okay. So this next question, we won't take as long on it, but this next set of questions is just around what kind of aspects would you actually try to incorporate to help your students? And what is the most important thing in the next generation system? And we're only going to take like a few minutes, but if there's any other lingering ideas of what you just heard from the rest of the tables, go ahead and talk about that. But if there's super important things about that next generation, we should be definitely working in. I heard some things, I think, as I was listening to all of you guys, but turn to talk just for a little bit, about 5 minutes. What are those key important things for the next generation systems? So who's solved all the data system problems? Report out. I want to hear about it. Any thoughts? More seriously, any more thoughts though about kind of what that next generation of systems looks like?
We'll go first since we went last. And I'll just kind of start talking to you guys to jump in.
We had a heated discussion.
So there's this the whole table is interested in like what interventions are being applied. What's happening with the kids after they've been flagged or somehow brought into the spotlight. So what's going on there?
And what happened 2 years ago?
Yeah,
so
exactly. So and I mean the other thing we're kicking around is that we got to be very mindful that we could easily overload the meager capacity to do extra work in schools that are stressed out. And I don't mean that pejoratively.
Right.
So there's this concern about, well, how do you, so there's a lot of information to unpack around interventions and who's getting them. Do they seem to pair up with any kind of changes over the state of time? But then that's got to be easy to see. So just a plug for everybody in the room is to go back to your labs and think about a Sankey diagram and so if you look at Sankey, it's basically an engineering diagram. It's a flow chart to show how things move from one state into another set of states. And so if you have 3 tiers for your at-risk system and you've got 6 interventions, you can show how your students are moving into those interventions and whether or not they're moving out of their risk tier.
Yeah.
Just an idea. One more thing is that what can we do to capture the expertise in the classroom? And so we've got these systems that are kind of floating on top of everything, and they're injecting a signal into an educational setting. And there's a teacher there that knows that kid really well. Do they agree with that risk tier? Do they know something the system doesn't know? And how do we capture any of that information?
Yeah, that kind of gets into that false negative. As we're building the models that predict when kids are at risk, you're always going to have some false positives on there.
And one other point that I think we need to remember, and Marcus brought that up very well, is that, if we're looking at, say, a counselor, and a counselor has 400 kids, how much time are we going to spend entering what's going on, right? It's that counseling. So the one thing that we have to do is make it very simple, because you're not going to solve all your problems. You're going to get enough information to see are they working, and then you can see it's working with that person but not with that person, and then you can drill down. But if you start trying to build in so much information that's going to have all your answers for you, then you're not going to have time to actually do your work.
Yeah. Any other thoughts? Those are great. That's really where the rubber meets the road, right? So we can build these systems, but if we don't know what interventions we're providing, if those interventions are working, or if it takes way too much time, then that's not going to be a helpful system, right? Other thoughts? Yes.
So David said something that, and I think that's kind of the philosophy of the room, is that we got to create systems that tell us what to do next versus systems that just give us data.
Yeah.
So, and whatever that means. We, in California, improvement science is taking off unbelievably. So I think that when you focus on the actions, that you're going to maybe get to the point where you're going to be looking at the intervention or an action within an intervention and see if it's actually working. And then you're going to you're gonna do some cycle that's going to tweak it if it's not working, or it's going to expand it if it is working.
So I think personally for all of this to work, there has to be an integration of systems. And right now, depending on where your early warning system platform sits, whether it's within your student information system or outside of that, and where your logging of intervention strategy sits, whether it's a Google Sheet or your own student information system or something that another vendor has created through a fancy app. It's all about making sure that these places talk so that you can see what that historical, or profile of that student is, or else you still have the user going to 3 different places to get this comprehensive picture.
Right. That's interesting that you say that, because I know when I first started working in this, there was a lot of conversation from the districts, like, don't make me double enter anything. But then that's interesting also, because like, don't also make me go somewhere else. Once I log in, let me have all of that information right there. And that is, the other thing that I saw yesterday was, we still have like snapshots of all of these different data pieces, right? But I still trying to find something that covers that whole broad range. That's still
Not overwhelming, right?
Yeah, did you see Chicago's, their public report, at least, that's what Jenny was showing yesterday, had the 5 different strands, right, Jenny?
Right.
And so you could click on each of those strands and then that area that you're focusing on. I don't know, is your user interface, like the stuff that people are using in the district, the schools, actually the same?
That looks just published at the school level, and so what's given to schools looks quite a bit different. I mean, the stuff that we do give to schools is very low tech. It's done in like Excel or PowerPoint, so it's nothing fancy, but we have an online tool which allows people to delve into data.
Well, the public site is beautiful. Any other thoughts? Yes, back here. Amy.
Yeah, I just want to really emphasize, I think, that the power of the multi-tier system of supports and how important it is for us to help our users identify the fact that if we have a lot of students who are flagged, we need to look at our tier 1, right? We have to look at our universal supports for all students so that we don't find so many students in that tier 2 or in that tier 3 in the first place. And if we don't have that conversation and help them recognize that aspect of it, they are going to burn out, because there's a natural tendency for educators. We come in because we love our students and we want to help each and every one of them, but we cannot do that and be sustainable, right? We will burn out if we jump to this tier 3 automatically.
Yeah.
So, did you want to add?
Yeah, so I think that as we have this conversation about adding in the interventions, the multi-tiered systems of support, not skipping the importance of tier 1. So like, what's the tier 1 intervention strategies that you've already used to demonstrate the needs for tier 2 or tier 3?
By making it into the data system itself to prompt that people sitting around the table to have to think about what is your tier 1, and you could log it in your data system and say, oh, we have chronic absenteeism with this group of students and we're just going to start doing individual calls. Well, hold on. What's your tier 1 approach? But to get schools to sometimes take a second to pause, and that's where I do think improvement science can be really helpful, because sometimes we think we're just going to put a technical fix on that. Well, we made all the phone calls, so we did our tier 1. Well, actually, did you ask the students or the families if that made any difference? And let's do some short improvement cycles to see if that's going to make a difference whole system. So I think that there's some opportunity in that practice, but you kind of need the data system to prompt to help direct people there.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But not lose that human relationship and that special conversation, because that is critical. I know we're from the South, but I'm telling you, the research supports.
It's very important, but a lot of times we find ourselves in a situation where we're too busy mopping up the floor to go turn off the water, right? So, trying to find a happy medium, we definitely, having an individual mentor for every kid or some contact with the kids. That could even be a tier 1. I heard one school talking about how they were,
That's the tier one.
That's the tier one, right?
That's
yeah,
tier one.
they got that.
Yeah.
Right. I heard schools that like putting up pictures of all the students and everybody goes through to sit, making sure that put your name on these students that you actually have a relationship with or feel like you can talk to in the hallway, right? And then which kids don't have any names on them. And those are the kids we need to make sure that we're out there for. And I think that that's really important too, but yeah. Everybody's familiar with tier 1, right? Like a TSS, okay, just sort of.
I debated on whether or not to share this, but I will anyway. So about a decade ago, I saw and witnessed the most sophisticated learner-centered, aligned instructional data system I'd ever seen. And so we visited a school in North Carolina, A.B. Combs Elementary, with Muriel Summers. I don't know if you've heard of Muriel Summers. But Muriel she had done a really good job branding what her school was about, and she used leadership as a distraction. So I'd never seen anybody quite do this way. But Muriel was really clever in this, so she partnered with Stephen Covey. And so there was a lot written about that school and the leader in me, and so some of you may have seen that publication and maybe used it in your districts. The underlying theme of her school had nothing to do with leadership. It was all pictures and slogans throughout the building. What her school did, and they did it, they used Hattie's research before Hattie done it. And they recognized that teachers working in teams increased performance better than any other intervention that they could do. They also knew that well-structured instructional processes where they actually made their plan in 15-minute increments. But that wasn't the most powerful part. The most powerful part were the student-led conferences where the student owns their own personal data and development. And when I say students, I'm talking about kindergarten. So I was in a little room with a 5-year-old who had his charts up there and showed me where he was in his Lexile reading scores, and now he was halfway in the 2nd grade. So when we think about data systems, I think we have to think about what are the key questions we're trying to answer. And that school, and under the direction of Muriel, had answered a really important question for the kid, from the kid perspective. When do I own my personal development? When do I do that? And how are you helping me get there?
Yeah.
Aligned instructional data system I've ever seen. And so we visited a school in North Carolina, A.B. Combs Elementary, Muriel Summers. I don't know if you've heard of Muriel Summers. Muriel she had done a really good job branding what her school was about, and she used leadership as a distraction. So I've never seen anybody quite do this way. But Muriel was really clever in this. So she partnered with Stephen Covey. And so there was a lot written about that school, the leader in me. And so some of you may have seen that publication and maybe used it in your district. The underlying theme of her school had nothing to do with leadership. It was all pictures, slogans throughout the building. What her school did, and they did it, they used Hattie's research before Hattie done it. And they recognized that teachers working in teams increased performance better than any other intervention they could do. They also knew that well-structured instructional processes where they actually made their plan in 15-minute increments. But that wasn't the most powerful part. The most powerful part were the student-led conferences where the student owns their own personal data development. And when I say students, I'm talking about kindergarten. So I was in a little room with a 5-year-old who had his charts up there and showed me where he was in his Lexile reading scores, and now he was halfway in the 2nd grade. So when we think about data systems, I think we have to think about what are the key questions we're trying to answer. And that school, and under the direction of Muriel, had answered a really important question for the kid, from the kid perspective. When do I own my personal development?
Well, and setting goals around that too. I had one school that was showing the data to the kids, and then even at the elementary schools, and then they were having them set their own goals for, by the end of the year, I want to be at this level, you know. The kids are smart. Give them credit. That girl yesterday from Kentucky, amazing, right? Outschooled a lot of us. Any other final kind of thoughts before we're going to do what feels like a very hard shift into some data security stuff? All right. So, these systems are all built on data, right? And we need to have some data security around that. So, I know that we've talked a little bit about the privacy of students. There's two main reasons why we want to have this data security, right? One is privacy. So, I don't know, this conversation kind of ebbs and flows, and I think it varies by what region you are in the country about how concerned parents are about their students' data, right? So how many of you live in a state where parents are very concerned about their students' privacy, the privacy of their students' data? Or is everybody right? I mean, I've been in some places though where they're like sending you Excel spreadsheets with the actual student identifier on it. So, which you should be deleting that and then deleting from your deleted and then trying to show best practices after that. So privacy is definitely a concern. But then there's also some legal ramifications around that too, right? So we have the FERPA, which protects student privacy, and we want to honor that. And if you violate FERPA, if there is some kind of hack out there or something, then you can lose your federal funding. There's some major ramifications to that. And then some states also allow for monetary damages even for the disclosure of private information. So if there is a hack and your data is out there, it can create a situation where you have to contact every single one of those parents that you're trying to build up the trust with, and you have to go tell them, hey, your data's been possibly breached, you know. So we want to avoid that. And another thing that I hear a lot around data security is, well, nobody's going to try to hack student information systems. Why would they want to do that? And I want to say, hackers are getting a lot more savvy out there. A lot of them are trying to take this data and then ransom it back. So we're seeing this in city sites and county sites where I got your data and for no other reason than I want you to pay me in Bitcoin or whatever that is. So if you've heard those stories, this should be creating some heightened sensitivity around the conversation. So it's very important to take it seriously. The two main concerns usually that we hear from parents is that we don't want our students being tracked. My student right now is 10. Then when they're 35, I don't want them running for president or something like that. I don't want somebody to be able to dig back in the archives and say, oh, well, they failed that third grade reading test, you know, which is not the intent of most of us, right? We're not trying to like track these people to dig up dirt when they try to run for president or something like that. So alleviating some of those concerns around we're not trying to track our students, right? So those are some of those conversations as we're forming collaboratives and we're trying to work together. We need to address this and assure the community and the parent families that we are not trying to track our students, right? The other piece that comes up is marketing, right? So that's another reason why a lot of tech companies sometimes are selling some of that data so that we can start to be marketed to. We're all familiar with social media and Facebook, and you get the ads that are based on what you click on and things like that. And we don't want that kind of situation to lead over into what we're doing in this situation. So again, just trying to keep those two pieces very clear of why this is important. So there's a couple of exclusions on FERPA that allow us to actually share the data. One of them is being a school official. So how many of you guys are sharing data under the school official, or do you know? I know somebody had talked, okay. So I just happened to talk to a few people that already knew about this, but so school official says our school does not have the capacity to be able to do the work, and so we're going to contract out or hire out somebody else to do the work that we're doing within our school, right? So that's that school official disclosure. This has changed over time. So in 2008, Revisions to FERPA stated that a contractor or a consultant or a volunteer or other party, whoever the agency deems appropriate, can actually use some of that data. And then in 2011, there were further revisions to clarify that schools could disclose the information to third parties to audit or evaluate. So those are the main reasons that you can use to get around FERPA and actually share that data with each other. So with school officials, again, that's going to be who has the ability to access that PII data, that personally identifiable information, that student-level disaggregated data. And it basically has to prove that you have a legitimate educational interest in the information. This can include professors, instructors, administrators, health staff, counselors, clerical staff, attorneys, trustees, members of the community. So all of these collaboratives that we're using, we can share the data with each other as long as there's a reason for us and as long as you can make a clear case around that. So then we also have the contractors, consultants, and volunteers. The main reasons why you want to use this is to perform an institutional service or function for which the agency or institution would otherwise use employees. It's under the direct control of the agency or institution with respect to use and maintenance, so there still has to be the school clarifying that, like, yes, we agree with this, we can see this. At no time do you have the right to take that student data and not give it back to the agency, right, or to that school. And it's subject to requirements governing use and re-disclosure of personal identifiable information. So as we're creating these systems, this is also another one of those crossover pieces. As we're creating these systems, we really need to make sure that any of that stuff that's public facing, like we can have individual student data within our teams and look at that to make decisions. But anything that's public facing, we really need to be careful to make sure that it's de-identified, right? And de-identification doesn't just mean taking identifiers. If you have 5 variables about a student, let's say their race, their grade, what school they're in, whether they're ELL status, you can start to figure out who those students are. So especially in rural places, we need to be very careful about what is released to the public. And I think somebody was talking yesterday about like how they just don't release anything to the public. Like, we keep this all, we need to build that trust and that relationship. If there is a breach, then that destroys that trust in the county, right? So if you are, how many of you guys are from outside of a district? You're a partner in districts. So this is more of the type of FERPA exception that you would write about in your data sharing agreement. There's also cross-institution exception. And so that's going to be from one institution to the other. A lot of this is going to be from your high school, your K-12 system into your post-secondary system. But anytime that student is moving across institutions, you have the right to get that data, to share that data. The other thing is it is possible, if none of these fit your situation, it's also possible to still get the data as long as the parents sign off for it. Right, so a lot of Boys and Girls Club have a data disclosure, after-school clubs have this data disclosure form that says, yes, you can share my students' data so that you can help support them a little better. Any questions about those two? Yes?
It's more of a point of clarity when you talk about personally identifiable variables are, and I don't know if you've come across this or other school districts or partners, but I think at least what we've been reviewing more closely is what identifiable data can go even to our partners. So we're looking more closely at the economically disadvantaged flag or your low income or your farm flag, and there's a different interpretation when you look at the National School Lunch Act, I think, and whether that information can be shared. So I don't know if other school districts or partners have come across that when they meet with their legal offices as to whether the economically disadvantaged flag can go with that student information.
Right, and I think a lot of that also has, so the free and reduced lunch status, like I remember people talking about this like 7 years ago. There's not a lot of clarity from IES on what exactly that means, but usually the rest of that FERPA law though talks about how you should be looking, you should only have the data that you need, right? So if you are trying to, let's say, build an early warning system model where you actually need that in the model to accurately create thresholds, then that's okay, because that's a reason. But if I'm just in a school team, why do I need to have that level of information? I don't, right? So trying to use extra security around that is important. Yes?
So I'm curious, because what you're saying sounds to me like what I've experienced, and I'm in higher ed, but the new Title IV regs have really choked all access that I have to even something like yes or no. I don't need any dollar amounts, but for student success at a school that has a high share of Pell students, it's important for us to be able to access or at least have an indicator of financial insecurity to prevent, prevent students from leaving or to help them persist in the institution. So is that trickling out to K-12? Because I would imagine that financial insecurity is a predictor for a lot of things in y'all's space.
So there's a factor to that I think needs clarification. So free and reduced lunch indicators, they're not owned by the Department of Ed. It's not a program that's managed through the Department of Ed.
Okay.
It's managed through the Department of Agriculture, and they have much stricter rules governing how that data can be disseminated.
Even stricter.
Yeah, much stricter.
Yes.
It can only be personally identifiable at the state level. If it goes to the district level, it has to be controlled within a certain group. It can't be distributed at the school level. So there's all sorts of issues surrounding the application and sharing of that specific data set. I don't know whether or not similar rules apply to Pell recipients, whether that's managed. I think that's managed through the Department of Ed. But if it's managed within a separate group that has defined its own data security requirements, we've run into that a lot with districts or state agencies saying, how can we get you FRL data? Like how are other organizations doing it? And there are certain localities where they're just sort of like skirting what's acceptable versus what's not. So it's really incumbent upon you as the data owner to make sure that you're conforming to what your legal advice interpretation would be for that data element.
Because I would say it varies drastically depending on where you're at and where your lawyer is. But that's another reason, I've always said when you're having your early warning system team meetings, you need to have your IT person or whoever's building the system in the room in the conversation so they can understand what you're wanting to do. I think having those lawyers there also so that they can actually understand what you're trying to do, why you need that exception is really important.
And just to add to this, I think everyone's got to think through is that the free and reduced price lunch variable is losing its meaning very rapidly because the same Department of Agriculture, for good reasons, is trying to make sure everybody gets food. And so they moved to sort of various methods where schools can certify 100% of their kids based on their data that every kid gets marked free and reduced price lunch. And therefore, it's no longer a good marker of economic status. And I can see, though, in this transition, especially from your point, from K-12 to higher ed, that if we lose the ability to transmit data about financial insecurity, that's a key thing, right? Because we know that yes, the most important thing are the actual behaviors, but especially at higher ed where you have to pay to go, that becomes more of a factor on itself than even some of just the behavior. So I think that's something for people to tussle with, that even though it's hard to get to begin with, it's pretty much going to disappear as a useful indicator in itself. But that ability to understand how kids with different economic backgrounds are doing is still going to matter. And so it's...
Well, I would say please don't ever use that as an indicator itself because it's not actionable. But putting it in the model is very appropriate a lot of times. Go ahead, Angela.
Just, and not to get like all the way in the weeds about this, but the notion of higher education institutions sharing data with scholarship providers blew up over the past year a lot because of all the conversations about the reorganization of the Higher Education Act. Essentially, the Department of Education said higher ed institutions can't share our data anymore with anyone. all scholarship providers and nonprofit organizations were like, I'm sorry, what are you saying? We can't know whether our students need money from you. So it was just a very long conversation. There was a coalition of college access organizations and scholarship providers that essentially got a paragraph put into the omnibus bills allowing that data sharing to happen. So it was like an actual great illustration of networks working for young people in terms of interventions and supports. But it's going to be an ongoing conversation with the Higher Education Act. I just say that I think that's a good thing for us to be paying attention to as we're talking about pathways between higher education and K-12 and the nonprofit organizations that support students in that pathway. So it's a really important policy piece for folks in the room to just kind of pay attention to and to keep, I think, updating each other about and advocating around.
Can I ask a follow-up question, kind of related to this, or follow-up question and a comment? One, I imagine that as we think about, we're thinking a lot about integrated data systems, so where you're pulling other, not just like education data, but health data and whatever it may be. I imagine each of those data sources represent a different challenge with like HIPAA or whatever it may be, the case may be. But at the higher ed level, I'm curious, is there an act similar to FERPA, or does it still extend to FERPA? It is FERPA, okay. And so then what about is there like a K-16 ID, or do you use social SSN, or do you have a new ID that they get when they get to the university?
The university ID. Yeah, whatever you get, your school ID.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That also depends on what state you're at, because in Montana, the student ID follows them into the higher ed, right?
It does. If they come from Montana, it'll follow it. But if they come from Montana, somewhere else. And only if they put it on their college application.
So it's kind of their choice whether it follows them?
What's that?
It's like their choice whether it follows
Yes.
them?
It's Montana, come on.
I think it's your choice.
All right. Any other, yes, back here.
Guys, one of the things I think we need to watch out for, because I've been looking at these things over time, is poverty in and of itself is going to be giving you a red flag thing. And one of the things we're doing increasingly for anybody that's getting a red flag is being intrusive and prescriptive. Right? So does this mean the poor kids are going on conditional admit?
Right.
I don't think that's the way we should go. Right? And it might be that it wouldn't hurt to talk to somebody, but be prescribing that you're going to be doing something that's very dangerous. So I think we need to really think through the ethical implications of how we're using this data and how we're compartmentalizing it.
Well, and we had a whole group around indicators and what makes a good indicator, and whether it's actionable or not is huge, right?
Yeah, I was just going to link back to what you've been saying about improvement science. Like, it's part of this work is really about teaching about the data pieces, but a really big part of it is teaching about the reflection and looking at the ways to improve the skills of which I think that addresses the ability of brain power.
I was also going to say, just sort of on the note around data sharing, when we start doing intervention tracking as a component, particularly as it's tied to our data systems, there always is a need for note-taking as a component of intervention tracking, so that you have a little bit of backstory, whether you're an in-school team or if you have community partners sitting at the table with you. Or if a family requests, I've had families say, I want to know, a parent say, I didn't know you were talking about my child at school, which is, shouldn't be talking about him at school, but anyway, the parent wanted to see all of the case notes about their student. And so it's going to be very important that the professional learning and the training, and I don't know how much you can mitigate for that in data systems, of what is the content of those case notes that is kept in an electronic record. Because that also then, if that gets shared outside of the system, and I was thinking about the 10-year-old who's running for president, 30 years later, and there's some case note noting bullying or mental health issues or anything like that, and suddenly we're stigmatizing his child, an adult, based on childhood behavior, and adults talking about that child at that time. So I think there's got to be some real care in the evolution of intervention, even with the Google Sheets, what we what we notate about a student really can matter significantly in an electronic form.
Yeah. Yes, having those conversations up front of who needs to see what. I think this is also a really important conversation. What I've heard from some places is we don't give our teachers the actual early warning system data because we don't want them to stigmatize the students in the class. But sometimes the teachers need to be brought in to have those kinds of conversations about what is going on in the classroom. So, I mean, again, this all has to be made these decisions have to be made at a team level, right? And just be cognizant that you should be having these conversations. Did you have?
Yeah, we tend to talk about FERPA as sort of like a uniformly applied set of rules, and one of the things that we've been very conscious of is that the rules governing how you disseminate and treat a 17-year-old's data are very different than how you treat a 10-year-old's data, and what you can do and how you can share it. So make sure that you're running down those conversations as you sort of are building these indicating systems so that you know that as you are sharing this data with vendors or with stakeholder partners, you're not running afoul of other legislation that may be layered on top of FERPA that further protect younger students' information.
Well, and that kind of gets into, so HIPAA is much better defined. So HIPAA is what covers your health records, and it's much better defined. And so when I'm going to data security conferences, I am always listening for the HIPAA, because a lot of that data that we're collecting on students does include HIPAA data too. So if you can cover HIPAA, then you can cover FERPA. So HIPAA is that larger, more defined umbrella. All right, any other thoughts? I love the conversation that we're getting around data security, because usually people fall asleep on me when I talk about it. So if you are creating this data sharing agreement, there are some key aspects of it. We do have examples also if you are trying to create a data sharing agreement with an outside organization or cross-institutionally. But some of those key aspects are going to be the purpose of the agreement. You always have to justify why you need the data. So if you do need some kind of data point around student poverty levels to build your model, that needs to be specifically outlined there. How you're actually going to be using that data, so if you are running a model, the whole entire model needs to be in that data sharing agreement, if that's what, or you can make it a little bit more general, but at least talking about the types of analyses that you're going to be running with that. And this is a lot for the evaluation side, but also for building those models of testing thresholds. A description of all of those data pieces. Now this can be more broad usually because there's different measures of attendance, right? So you need to maybe have those conversations with the data provider about what variable exactly you're going to want. So you can say attendance. So when you're describing that requested data, that can be a little bit more broad before you actually go and have those conversations about the specific data elements. Making sure to include statements of data security and confidentiality. How you're going to store and transfer that data. The other piece that people forget about is I've got the data, I get it transferred to me, I'm holding it in my organization. But all data sharing agreements should also have a termination of how long you can hold that data, right? So making sure that that is expressly stated, but then also followed through. And I don't know how many files we have that have never been destroyed sometimes because people just forget about that part of it. So do your system a favor and actually destroy the data when you say that you're going to be destroying the data. That period of agreement and termination is what I just talked about. Some additional considerations is just the obligations of the school district in requesting organizations. So again, having those kind of collaborative conversations about what we need and when we need it. And I'm just going to end on, a lot of this is really hard, but you can do it and there's a ways to get around it. So keep pushing and doing the good fight. Do this. I have one more turning talk, but I think we're at time, so I'm going to turn this back over to Bob. Thank you, guys.